Hi everyone, today we have the third instalment of the Wee Dougie stories. Wee Dougie and the Games. Wee Dougie helps to set up the first Elf Highland Games, but the Ceeujimmi Trophy is stolen by goblins and Dougie is involved in a daring rescue to secure its return. Wee Dougie and the Games by David George Douglas for Bridie, Holly, Skye and Farah. On his return from the North Pole, where he helped Santa get ready for Christmas that year, Wee Dougie was pleased to learn he'd been appointed Glen Keeper. This involved representing Clan Kilkettle in all their dealings with the elf clans and other creatures throughout the great expanse of the Caledonian forest. As he'd now discovered a love of travel, he was looking forward to seeing a lot more of the world beyond the Glen of Kilkettle, where he lived together with Morag, his Shetland pony, and Shugal, his pet haggis. Dougie was a Scottish Highland elf, now 178 years old, and in elf culture, a young adult. As some of you will know, elves are very long-lived and cannot be considered elders until they reach 250 years of age. At the first council gathering he attended, it became clear that humans were again causing problems throughout the natural world of elves, goblins, and others. Humans, of course, occupy a very unnatural world. The gnomes were especially upset because so many of them were being used by humans as garden ornaments. It appeared that the only escape from this fixed existence was to be kissed by a puddock. Frog to you. And not every puddock wants to kiss a gnome. They would have to discuss this further and see if some arrangement could be agreed with the puddocks. Humans, in general, don't mix well with the natural order of things, and are always trying to control matters to their own advantage, so the elves keep well clear of them wherever possible. Dougie had no sooner reached his village of Drumbodnod when he was told to go and see the clan leader immediately. He quickly gave Morag some feed, saddled her, then he and Shugal mounted up and headed for the house of Callum Kilkettle of Kilkettle. He lived in an ancient hollowed-out oak tree near the centre of the glen, overlooking the Loch of Fitlike. On their arrival, Callum descended to the ground by a rope ladder and welcomed them home before adding, "I'm afraid I have to ask you to be on your travels again. The Buzzard Mail has just delivered a message requesting our help in setting up some form of games for when the elf clans gather for our summer ceremony." This was held each year in a large stone circle near their main settlement of Dunderhead. The standing stones had been erected by their originals as a sporting and entertainment arena, and the ring was formed within a natural circle of grassy slopes where the elf spectators sat to cheer on their respective clan members. After much deliberation, Wee Dougie and other glen keepers agreed a games programme. The main events and rules were confirmed, and it's surprising how several bear some resemblance to those later adopted by humans for their own type of games. Dunderhead Caledonian Games, Events and Results. Turnip tossing. This involves heaving a large turnip over a bar which is raised as the competition progresses, and the best competitor receives free turnips for a year. The winner was Colin Away You Go of the aptly named Clan McTumshie. Burling the bannock. Very hard stale bannocks, Scottish flatbreads, are held in the hand, the elves spinning around and around before releasing the bannock and throwing it as far as possible. The winner was Andrew Tatty Bogle of Clan McKeepyuppy, who was awarded 100 fresh bannocks with pots of jam and cream. Running the stone circle. The run is backwards and causes much mayhem, many crashes and falling over as the elves jostle in, out and through the stone arches. The winner was Jamie You're Joking of Clan McTumshie, and his prize was a free trip to the new circle of Stonehenge. Racing the salmon upstream. Each competitor carrying a sack of stones must race against a selected salmon on its way upstream between two marked points. The winner was Johnny Wee Donder of Clan Megizapai, with an award of a case of salmon-scented aftershave. Heading the rock bun. 10 large overbaked rock buns are strung from poles in a line, with each competitor having to run and jump to header each bun before crossing the finishing line. For some strange reason, this event became known as the Glasgow Kiss. The winner, when he regained his senses, was announced as Granite Banger of Clan McTumshie, and his prize was a week at the Rest and Be Thankful holiday complex. And finally, hurling the clootie dumpling. This is a test of strength and speed to see how quickly an elf can get round the standing stones, hurling the clootie dumpling over every formed arch. The winner was Quintin Runenrun of Clan McStookie, who claimed first prize of 52 clootie dumplings, one for every week in the year. The final outcome was a close-run thing, but the eventual winners were Clan McTumshie of Glen Havers, and Wee Dougie was given the honour of presenting the now famous Ceeujimmi Trophy to their clan leader. The celebrations went on well into the night, with every elf cheering Clan McTumshie as they paraded the trophy around the stone circle. Wee Dougie, Shugal and Morag found a good dry spot beneath one of the arches and settled down for a well-earned rest. They were awoken in the early hours of the morning by cries of, "We've been robbed! We've been robbed!" This was being shouted out by several of the McTumshies, and it was soon apparent that the trophy had gone missing. Some elves quickly pointed out that goblins had been seen not far from the circle earlier in the day, and suspicion fell on them for their mischievous ways. All the elves were angry and wanted to set off in pursuit, but after some discussion it was agreed that Morag, with her keen sense of smell and nose close to the ground, would be best suited to find the goblins. Dougie saddled up Morag, secured Shugel on his back, and led the small Shetland pony to where the goblins had last been seen. After searching the area for some time, they came across a goblin hat, which was different from the normal bobble hat that elves are seen in. Morag took a good sniff and immediately picked up the scent, which led them towards the southern edge of the great Caledonian forest. The land had once been totally covered by this forest, in which elves, goblins, gnomes, fairies, and all sorts of creatures lived and played together. When humans arrived, they cut down many of the trees for houses and to clear the land for farming, and now the woodland creatures were restricted to the more remote parts of the forest. The small pony kept her nose low and moved steadily along the path formed over many years by constant use until they reached a clearing in the centre of which stood a goblin encampment. Wee Dougie knew he would have to play things carefully here, and he turned things over in his mind before nudging Morag forward, and they made their way into the goblin settlement. Goblins are normally well enough behaved, but occasionally their naughty streak gets the better of them, and they go a bit off the rails. They are also a bit off-putting in appearance, and when they screw up their eyes, can look a little evil, but it's mainly just a front. The chief goblin appeared and asked Dougie, "What brings you here, wee fellow?" Dougie took a deep breath and responded, "Greetings, Chief. It appears our games trophy has gone missing, and I was wondering if any of your goblins had possibly come across it anywhere." The chief, whose name was Groucho Getlost, looked down at the three newly arrived visitors and chuckled. "Well, you've got nerve, I'll give you that." At that moment, a loud shriek was heard from the direction of the riverbank. Everyone rushed over to see a young goblin being swept away downstream in the swollen river, having fallen from an overhanging tree branch. Goblins are notorious poor swimmers, and no one seemed to know what to do. Wee Dougie quickly mounted up on Morag and followed the riverbank some way, looking for a good point to try and reach out for the youngster. Instead, he spotted a small rocky island midstream and leapt off Morag, releasing Shugel from his back as he did so. Dougie dived into the fast-flowing water and immediately felt its force tugging at him. Fortunately, he'd picked the right entry point, and after a considerable struggle, managed to grab hold of a small branch, which allowed him to get between two rocks and up to safety. He turned and could see the young goblin heading towards him, but it looked likely he'd be swept to the side by the torrent. Dougie jumped from stone to stone to find the best position, and taking a tight grip of a sharp rock with one hand, he reached out as far as he could and just managed to grab a shirt collar. He pulled the goblin onto a wet stone and was so relieved to see his eyes flicker, followed by a bout of coughing and spluttering as his lungs cleared themselves of river water. Now they were faced with the problem of how to get both of them back to the riverbank. By now the goblin tribe had arrived and were lining the bank, and Groucho ordered someone to run back quickly to the settlement and fetch some rope. This done, one end of the rope was secured to a large tree, and Groucho swung the other end out over the river. However, the swift current kept sweeping the rope past the small rocky outcrop, and it took several attempts before finally Dougie caught hold. He then wrapped the rope several times about both of them and tied a tight knot before jumping back into the waters. They both took a good few mouthfuls of river water as the goblins pulled them toward the bank, where they were quickly wrapped in dry blankets and carried back to the village. Groucho's wife and daughter hugged the young goblin before taking Dougie in their arms and announcing, "This is a very brave elf indeed." It became clear that the youngster he'd saved was in fact Groucho's grandson, his daughter's eldest boy. "Come on," said Groucho. "Let's get you two dried off and find some fresh clothes." Hot baths were prepared, and an exhausted wee Dougie sank down into the welcoming heat. He would have fallen asleep if it hadn't been for Shugal chattering on about how hard he'd had to pull on the rope and how he'd nearly dived in after Dougie, but remembered just in time that he couldn't swim. Dougie smiled at his small friend and said, "What would I do without you, Shugal?" The haggis, standing awkwardly on his too long and too short legs, puffed himself up and explained, "Oh, it was nothing, Dougie. Think no more about it." Morag, standing at the door and overhearing the conversation, smiled to herself and munched on another mouthful of oats. That night the goblins arranged a banquet with wee Dougie as guest of honour, and the hours passed happily, with Shugal spending half the time introducing himself to anyone who would listen. "Very pleased to meet you. I'm Shugal McDougal of Auchenboogle, and I'm wee Dougie's best friend in the whole world. Have I told you we haggis are an endangered species?" Later in the evening, the Ceeujimmi Trophy mysteriously appeared before Dougie, and Groucho whispered in his ear, "This was found by some of my lads on the outskirts of the village," before giving him a sly wink. "You know, wee Dougie, if there's anything I can do for you, just say the word." "Well, Groucho," he replied, "as it happens, we do have a small problem that you goblins could help with." Dougie proceeded to describe the situation about the use by humans of gnomes as garden ornaments. "You goblins have great influence with frogs," said wee Dougie. "Do you think you could persuade the frogs to carry out our wishes?" The goblin chief smiled and said, "Nae problem, wee man. The humans will never work out what's happened." So, if you ever find a gnome has gone missing from your garden, now you'll know, It must have been kissed by a frog. The end.